Greetings, brothers and sisters. John Hargrove here. Today is June 22nd, 2024. We're continuing a course of African philosophy summer school here at Division 421 in Atlanta. Okay, and we were talking about, why is this paused? Why is my share paused? So that's the introductory slide. We were talking about Message to the People, Course of African Philosophy. So last week we went through preface, foreword, and lessons 1 through 7. I'm going to do a brief recap of just the beginning part of what this text is, what it represents. Book is authored by Marcus Garvey, edited by Tony Martin, and it was authorized for print by Charles L. James, who was the 5th President General and a student of the course of African philosophy. Yeah, because we're going straight to lesson 8 today, I want everyone to understand what we're doing and why we are. Sorry, my microphone was way away. What we're doing and why we are utilizing this text, why Division 421 and myself specifically, why we value this text as a primary source. In the beginning of so first thing, in keeping with the constitutional provisions and the aims and objects of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, number 9, which is currently number 8, is to establish schools and colleges for the racial education for our race. The founder, first president general of UNIA, Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, made several attempts to educate some and re-educate others who would be charged with the responsibility of leadership in the UNIA. He sincerely felt that no one should be held responsible for his actions until he or she is educated or trained to perform those responsibilities. Since UNIA had become the largest responsible movement in racial history, its leadership should be thoroughly informed so that the proper information would be dispensed. Marcus Garvey was a man of vision, therefore his students had to be visionaries. So part of it is, as officers, Mr. Garvey didn't hold his officers accountable unless he felt they were properly trained. And this is the training that he developed. So I try not to hold our officers accountable until they have gone through this training. So that's part of what the importance of it is. Course started in 1937. Let me see. All right, I think that's all I need from that. Preface, Course of African Philosophy is a unique document with the exception of Mr. Garvey's poetical works. This is the closest thing to a book that Marcus Garvey ever wrote. This text represents, as it were, the last political will and testament of a man who stands without equal in the history of worldwide mobilization of African peoples. So this text we hold as Mr. Garvey's will, his political will and testament. And it's our guide to carry on the work of the organization after his death. Let's see. It was in 1937, 10 years after his deportation from the United States, 2 years after relocating to England, 3 years before his untimely death. Mr. Garvey introduced the course of African philosophy, nothing less than a distillation of a lifetime of organizational experience. It contained a mixture of techniques he himself had utilized to achieve success in an attempt to incorporate the hard lessons he had learned with the benefit of an unfortunate hindsight. So it's basically Mr. Garvey's life lessons. The immediate purpose of the course of African philosophy was to train a cadre of UNIA leaders who would carry on the great work of the organization after Garvey's death. So this was what Mr. Garvey was preparing for. Course described by Garvey as a, quote, most rigid system of training, covered over 42 subjects. Much of it remained unwritten. So when you look at this text, there's 22 written lessons, and the remaining lessons were committed to memory by the original students. for is the nature of a confidential in-house affair. Even the 22 written lessons reproduced here were guarded jealously from indiscriminate circulation. So that's what that's what the text is. Um, and that's what we are studying. So I'll jump back over to the PowerPoint for sake of time.
President John.
Yes, sir.
Hey, so I do have the Dover edition, but I don't have this one that was edited by Tony Martin. Is that the one that we are like going through, or do I need to have this copy?
Well, I would definitely highly recommend the version edited by Tony Martin, foreword by Charles L. James. This is the official version of the text. I have some copies here that don't have the cover doesn't look like this, but it has all the same words and it has all the same pages. So the information is fairly consistent throughout the different versions, but the other versions don't seem to have the foreword and the preface. So,
Okay.
but they should have the lessons 1 through 22. Some of them only go to lesson 21. They don't put lesson 22 5-year plan, but if you got lessons 1 through 22, you've got a pretty good text. Like I said, for me, the preface and the foreword kind of lays the foundation for the importance of the text, how it was created, and why it was created.
Right.
So,
Okay.
that's something that may be overlooked when people just jump straight into lesson one, and they're trying to grasp the information, but they're not taking into account the full context of how this text came into existence.
Right. Okay.
All right. So the general concept for lessons 8 through 14, in my opinion, and hold on, give me 1 second because I gotta fix one thing. Gotta fix a graphic. Just saw one of my graphics isn't the best. Um, all right. So one of the things that we touched on in lessons 1 through 7, first lesson, intelligence, education, universal knowledge, and how to get it. Marcus Garvey instructed us. That's basically the foundation. And you definitely gotta. It's going to be hard to grasp the later lessons without a full understanding of the first lessons. So you definitely got to go back and study lessons 1 through 7 and master lessons 1 through 7. Lesson 1 particularly, Mr. Garvey encourages us to read the history incessantly until we master it, particularly the history of man. He encouraged us to read 4 hours a day. He encouraged us to read before bed so that the concepts and facts become a part of our subconscious. Um, in addition to that, Mr. Garvey recommends that we read a chapter of the Bible every day. Let me find that in the. Let me find that and I'll pull that up. Where did I put the book? So in the text, Mr. Garvey, page 10 says, read a chapter of the Bible every day. Old and New Testament, the greatest wisdom of the age is to be found in the scriptures. You can always quote from the scriptures, basically to win support of the general public. But we don't promote any particular religion. Mr. Garvey was a Christian. He was a Catholic. and that was the religious background that he had. He's not, telling us to worship the Bible, but at least read the Bible, study the Bible, and know the Bible from a historical standpoint. And with that, the general concept that I've given for lessons 8 through 14 is Garveyism without works is dead, and that comes from James 2:17, which we probably are familiar with. James 2:17, even so, faith, if it hath not works, it is dead, being alone. So faith without works is dead. Garveyism without works is dead. Us knowing the philosophy, us knowing the teachings, knowing all the techniques but not applying it is dead. And so, all right, officially, I didn't never really opened up. So we'll open up with the pledge, if you would. You can come off mute, say it with me, or you don't have to. But for the official opening of the meeting, do the pledge. I commit my body, mind, and spirit to the
Mind, and spirit,
protection, defense, and security
protection, defense, and security
of the red, black, and green.
of the red, black, and green.
I dedicate my life to the redemption of Mother Africa
I dedicate my life to the redemption of Mother Africa
and the liberation of her scattered Black children.
and the liberation of her scattered Black children.
I accept for myself and my descendants
I accept for myself and my descendants
the teachings of universal African nationalism,
the teachings of universal African nationalism.
and I promise that our children will be instilled
I promise that our children will be instilled
with the purpose and knowledge of themselves as African people,
with the purpose and knowledge of themselves as African people,
in order that the cause of our struggle
in order that the cause of our struggle
will neither falter nor fail
will neither falter nor fail
until all Black people are free and united
till all Black people are free and united
through one God,
through one God,
one aim,
one aim,
and one destiny.
one destiny.
Race first.
Race first.
Let me run and grab some water really quick and get my glasses and I'll cut the camera off. Okay. So, course of African philosophy, Mr. Garvey's training for his leaders to carry on the work of UNIA after his death. Course consists of 22 written subjects and over 20 subjects committed to memory. Of the 22 written, there is intelligence, education, universal knowledge, how to get it, lesson 1, lesson 2, title leadership, lesson 3, aims and objects of the UNIA, lesson 4, elocution, or how to speak, lesson 5, talking about God and death to an extent, lesson 6, lesson on Christ, and how Garvey uses Christ as an example of potential of man, and lesson 7, character, which lays down the fundamental base principles of good character and characteristics that we should embody as well, I'm trying to go with society, as good members of society. So lesson 8 is social system. That's what we'll talk about today. Lesson 9, diplomacy, how to interact with different nations. Lesson 10 is economy, talks about personal as well as organizational economy, how to maintain that and grow that. 11 is man, very important lesson about not only ourselves, but our people, our current condition, and how to improve that condition. Lesson 12 is the purpose of institutions. So when we get to the solution of man, it kind of rolls into institutions in order to correct the natural wickedness of man. There must be the establishment of institutions. Lesson 13, the universe. That's a lesson that teaches us to think beyond the bounds of this world, but stretch our thinking, stretch our minds, always be thinking about, things, greater things than the mundane, the day to day. Yeah, we should be, in order to expand our mental capacity, Mr. Garvey encourages us to think about the universe and how the universe works. Self-initiative, teaching us to rely upon ourselves, and teaching us that, there's really no one else to rely on except for ourselves. Lesson 15 is personality. That's what Mr. Garvey, I love that lesson. As Mr. Garvey said, he's trying to make everyone a Marcus Garvey personified. But he's not looking to make us carbon copy duplicates. We all look the same, sound the same. Mr. Garvey in lesson 15 or 16, 15, teaches us that we all have our own unique personality. And that's what we're looking to bring to the movement, to the progress, to leadership, is not, a duplicate copy of what is coming to pass, but a modern version based on our own personality of what leadership is today and in the future. But phase 2 goes over lessons 8 through 14. And it's talking about community development, knowledge of nations and the state, historical record of man. Goal is to understand how societies work and the components of a society. So that's a big thing. It's a society. Lessons 1 through 7, we're looking at ourselves as individuals. Lessons 8 through 14, it should be 14. We're building a society. We're building a organization, a group of like-minded individuals, of individuals that understand our aims and objects, that desire for positions of leadership, that continuously seek knowledge. We are looking to build a society of those individuals. Understanding of how individuals contribute to society, striving to achieve a society of universal thinkers with self-initiative. So that's what we're gonna run through today, and we will knock this out by 5 o'clock. Any questions so far? Okay. Okay. So the personification of lessons 1 through 7 was a mirror. Personification of lessons 8 through 14 is somewhat of a dream team. So here you got a Black Last Supper, but basically, Jesus and his 12 disciples, dream team. And also keep in mind that, even in our great society of Garveyites, of graduates of the course of African philosophy, there will still be Judas-minded individuals, Judas-spirited individuals. So this isn't an end-all be-all, but this does create another level of organization, prior to the ultimate end goal. But in these lessons, now that we've developed ourselves, we've mastered ourselves, we are trying to again build a society of like-minded individuals and build a ideal society is the goal of these lessons. Lesson 8, what is a society and what is its purpose? And this goes back to lesson 7. So lesson 7, titled Character, states that the good character is defined by the society in which we live. And this is defining what a society is. It says a society, according to Mr. Garvey, page 69, of course, of African philosophy, is an organization of mankind to safeguard and protect its own interests, to maintain the greatest good for the greatest number. So it's a group that essentially works by majority rule. So whether that group is a church, whether that group is a sports team, the UNIA, United States government groups, nonprofit groups, different promoting different sexual identity groups. These are all societies, organizations of mankind that have come together to maintain the greatest good for their majority population. So we as Garveyites, we as UNIA, we've got to come together now and create a society that is most beneficial to our race. That's what Mr. Garvey is encouraging and directing us to do. Characteristics of society. How is a society made evident? Mr. Garvey teaches us on page 69 that society is made evident by regulations, rules, and laws. Members of society must obey the laws. So as you come into a group, with UNIA, we have our constitution. There has to be an agreed, stated opinion of what is right and wrong, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And in order to maintain your affiliation or participation in that society, you must abide by the laws and rules of said society. So just like UNIA has laws and rules, the United States has laws and rules. Other organizations, they have laws and rules, and they must abide within those laws and rules. But Mr. Garvey is saying that when you see an organization that has laws and rules, in effect, you are seeing a society. And these individuals have come together and made an agreement to what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. We have to do the same thing for ourselves. What is the only alternative to the organized system of society? The only alternative to that is rebellion. So once we do come together as a majority and say, we think people should be in the house by 10 o'clock. This is just an example. Obviously, it's not realistic. But some people in the society say, no, we don't think we need to be in the house by 10 o'clock. They are in rebellion to the established law. And that is, when you start to go against one law, what is stopping you from going against other laws? So there must be an agreement, and there must be adherence to these laws and rules. But this is what a society, these are characteristics of a society. What does Garvey mean when he says you should always seek to have something at stake in the community in which we live? Mr. Garvey encouraged us to be property owners. He calls them worthwhile citizens, and it's evidence of status. He says the government recognizes property owners, but property owners, I mean, in a sense, they are the government, the taxpayers. Those are the ones that are funding government programs, government institutions, activities. So it's just like with the UNIA. We have active members and we have ordinary members. But ordinary members don't get to tell active members what to do or how to function within the government. It's the active members, the dues paying members, that have a say so in our elections and our bylaws and our programs. So we should be contributing to society so that we have a legitimate voice in society. What type of attitude should we adopt toward the police and why? Mr. Garvey encourages us to have a friendly attitude toward the police. He says the police are supposed, and we stress that, supposed to be to protect the citizens. They're not supposed to be the public enemy, but the public protector. This goes back to question 3. What happens if we are rebellious? Or what happens when we break the rules? It creates rebellion. And the police are supposed to be there to maintain order. But if we don't have police, basically who's going to be there to maintain order? Why should you help the police to maintain order? Mr. Garvey says if the community loses peace, you will have riots. So again, as we're talking about, we are property owners now, we are taxpayers. We pay, the police to do the job of maintaining order. Um, it's kind of straightforward. So until we come together and build a force to replace the police, to maintain order and peace in our own communities to where we don't need the police. We have to understand the structure and the supposed intentions of the police and utilize them as such. Two ways that Garvey recommends to achieve objectives in a civilized community is good reason and good judgment. We'll talk about that more in upcoming slides. I thought I deleted that one. I'll resize this stuff. Apologies. All right. What is the national aspiration of the race of African people, according to Mr. Garvey? And he says that our national aspiration is to find expression not in revolution, but in our sovereign land in Africa. But basically, that's talking about our riots, our public displays of unhappiness, burning down buildings. That's not our ultimate goal. Finding a being, um, I guess first class citizens in the United States is not our goal. Our goal is to have sovereignty, a sovereign nation on the continent of Africa. We don't believe that blacks or as a minority, we will ever have any form of sovereignty as a minority in any land. So it's just not realistic. Um, Earlier in the text, Mr. Garvey said people with different outlooks and of different races never join together except they are subdued. They always find independent expression and action. The highest expression of independence is in the sovereignty of a nation. So that's what we are seeking, not, outside of, we'll talk about it a little bit more. I don't want to give it away, future answers. What is the highest service a citizen can refer to in a community or organized society? Mr. Garvey says the highest service a citizen can provide is to maintain peace, but to, maintain the order of a peaceful society. What are politics? Mr. Garvey defines politics as the science of government that protects those human rights that are not protected by law. And Google defines politics as activities associated with the governance of a country or area, especially among individuals hoping to achieve power. But we must understand what politics is. We must understand as leaders, as representatives of our communities. In essence, we are politicians, and we have to play that role. Why does Garvey say that we should know government officials? And he says he talked about this also in lesson 22, which is here. Mr. Garvey says a leader should always make an effort to be known in his community. He must acquaint himself with everything that is happening. He must know the governor of the state or country, the secretary of state of his state or his colonial secretary. He must know the mayor of his city and all the members of legislature. He must know the bishops of his city, the administrative heads of all government departments, all preachers and doctors and lawyers and prominent businessmen. So in lesson 2, Mr. Garvey said that a leader should be known by these individuals. Lesson 8, Mr. Garvey is reinforcing that sentiment. Wait, yeah, we should know government officials so that we can get help when we are in trouble. But we shouldn't wait until we're in trouble to try to make friends with government officials. We should have those relationships already developed as leaders and as representatives. What is something we must never do in regards to politics, specifically politicians? We must never sell ourselves to the politicians. So we must never be in a situation where we are being paid by someone, a politician, to carry out their will. Our directives come from our people alone. What should we do to bring about reforms and things that we think are right for our communities? Mr. Garvey says instead of rioting, we should make our vote count. And that's the purpose of owning property. We become legitimate citizens, we become representatives, we have a voice in the community. So use democratic process, use the political process, use the civilized process, vote, write laws, lobby in order to make change, but do not riot for change. What must we fight to maintain and or acquire in regards to politics globally? Mr. Garvey says we must always fight to maintain or acquire suffrage, and suffrage is the right to vote. But yeah, that's the basic fundamentals of self-representation, self-governance is being able to speak for yourselves. If you can't speak for yourselves, you don't have a vote, you don't have a voice. You're that's serious colonization, borderline slavery. Who handles the international policies of the organization? So anything international is handled by our international officers, but it's not a responsibility of local divisions to carry out international policy. What are two signs of a good government? Good governments always put down riots, and good governments always settle political difficulties in the interest of society. So settling political difficulties in the interest of society goes back to question one, organization of mankind to safeguard and protect its own interests to maintain the greatest good for the greatest number. So majority rule, those that have paid their dues, paid their taxes, of those individuals, everyone has been given an opportunity to give their voice. Everyone has been given an opportunity to give their opinion. The majority opinion is, we will not be outside after 10 o'clock. We have a 10 o'clock curfew. And that's just an example. When we riot against the government, who are we rioting against? When you riot against your government, you're rioting against yourself. Government is just a collection of the people. So you're rioting against yourself, but it's rebellion, it's chaos, it's undiplomatic, it's uncivilized. Do things the right way, develop policy, develop laws, vote on laws, lobby for laws, run for office, encourage others to run for office. But civilized politics is the way Mr. Garvey teaches us to create change, but not by rioting or destroying things. When the Constitution is insufficient to give you all the protection you need, how do you change it? And you change it through political action. Vote for change, do not riot for change. Okay. Brief snapshot of this is our dream team, our society. This is a high executive council of the UNIA-ACL, led by President General Michael R. Duncan, High Chancellor, First Assistant President General Raymond Duguay, Secretary General Brenda Amoakan, Second Assistant President General Brother Ogu Idakwoji, Third Assistant President General Brother Charles Butler, Fourth Assistant President General Brother Quahir Asar Khan. But yeah, this is our high executive council structure as of 2023. And we have an election coming up in August. So some of this may be updated or changed But in August, we will be electing President General, first, second, third, and fourth Assistant President Generals. Any questions on our society, the Society of the UNIA?
I got one quick question. So they do elections every year as far as for like the president and general assistants?
No, only once every 4 years for High Executive Council. Locally
Okay,
is every year. High Executive Council every 4 years.
okay.
Just to solidify this lesson on society and the importance of it, bring it full circle. When you look at the preamble of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the very first sentence has a lot of adjectives, but only a few nouns nouns. So the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, that's who we are, and this is what we are, is a social, that's adjective, friendly, humanitarian, charitable, educational, institutional, constructive, and expansive. All of these are adjectives, the types of something, but the last word is society. So the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, in its inception, was created, and it still is as a society. We function as a government. Society, like I said, society is a general term. You know, you could be a club, you could be a team, a government, a nation, a religion. All of those would identify as a society. Okay. Page 6, and going back to what we said in the beginning, Garveyism without works is dead. Page 6 of Course of African Philosophy, lesson 1, Mr. Garvey says the value of knowledge is to use it. So we must be applying the knowledge that we are acquiring, not just, hoarding knowledge. To be forewarned is to be forearmed, page 95. So um, as we go through this, we can't act surprised about how politics works, how politics functions, why we are not able to get the changes that we want on a legal level. It's very clear we don't have political power. We're not organized politically. Do we know the laws? Do we know how to write proposals or laws? Do we know who votes for these laws? Do we know the lobbies that are out there? Have we created our own lobby? But let's not act, like we've been taken advantage of, and we still can't read and we don't know what's going on. That's not an excuse anymore. It's 2024. Mr. Garvey and our ancestors have given us several examples, and we have been forewarned, so we should be armed for the future. Lesson 9, diplomacy. Diplomacy is now we're getting into interactions between societies or nations. It's like the elocution of a society. Elocution was how an individual communicates with other individuals. Diplomacy is how societies communicate with each other. What is diplomacy from Garvey's perspective? Mr. Garvey says diplomacy is a word used to express the peculiar relationship between nations. It is the relationship that nations use to conduct their communications or approach in dealing with matters of state. The thoughtful and careful consideration of words and ideas express relationship between nations. But let me see, diplomacy. I think diplomacy was also, and Lady President, I don't know if you have your text open, if he says trying to get the greatest outcome or your outcome while being least offensive, was something else that I remember him saying. What are two things that we must first be in order to be a diplomat? So, and again, Brother Najee, Sister Brittany, I don't like the fact that this is the first introduction, and don't take that too much. The only reason I say that is because diplomacy, lesson 9 and lesson 11, but lesson 9 more so, are two of the most improperly used and understood lessons. And again, in order to understand these later lessons, we must have a foundation with the first 7 lessons. So we must understand character. We must understand Christ. We must understand leadership. We must understand elocution. We must understand intelligence. But sometimes people grab lesson 9 first, and that becomes their foundation. And they think that, you know, they're doing the right thing because they're functioning as a diplomat, but they don't even realize that you've disregarded the first 7 lessons in how they are carrying out their diplomacy. So just take that with a grain of salt. But again, master the previous lessons before trying to um, utilize later lessons. So Mr. Garvey says in this lesson 2 things that we must be first to be a diplomat, and he says a very skillful thinker and a psychologist. But yeah, we have to be kind of think of all possibilities, not only think of what's best for us, but also think of, what is the other side trying to achieve. We must understand their goals as well. What must diplomats be able to do to safeguard and protect himself and the interests he represents? Mr. Garvey says diplomat must be able to read other people's minds and intentions. So again, we have to know what they want, what they're trying to get. Everybody wants something. And again, we're representatives now. We're not just representing ourselves, but we're representing our communities. So we not only are protecting ourselves, but we have to protect our communities. What should we feed our opponent? Wait. Why must a diplomat always give expressions that carry double meaning? So Mr. Garvey kind of encourages diplomats. Diplomat can say things that have double meaning. If one expression is dangerous to the effect of getting a good relationship, you can say it was not intended that way. So someone wants to say like, LeBron James, let me see, I'm trying to think of something. Yeah, LeBron James is the greatest dunker, and then somebody comes back says, Michael Jordan is the best basketball player. And then you're like, wait, I never said, he was the greatest basketball player. I just said he was the greatest dunker. But if we are talking about the greatest basketball player, then I would agree, Michael Jordan. But that was a poor example. But um, it's a diplomatic approach. It's a political approach. Those that have attended, and Lady President, you were at HEC, so you've actually utilized some of these techniques. But it's just a way of speaking, of not being offensive, but still trying to achieve your goals. And if it is interpreted to be offensive, then you have the opportunity to rephrase the statement. But it's higher level diplomacy and diplomatic tactics. What should we feed our opponent in order to get good results? Ms. Garvey says we should feed our opponent good words that mean nothing. Win them with the perfect smile and the most gentle manner. So we must be approachable, political, but we, can't always show our hands, show our cards. And even if it's someone or a group that we are, 100% opposed to, from a political diplomatic standpoint, we can't show that on our face. We must still function with diplomacy, especially, what is said to turn away wrath, perfect smile, and a kind word. So we must be smiling, we must be kind, we must be diplomats. We must be, working the room, friendly, but going back to character, exemplifying good character and allowing, the other politicians, the other diplomats to witness this immaculate character that we've developed. If a man is going to kill you by threatening you, what does Garvey say is best to do? Mr. Garvey says it's best to smile with him, but that's um, it's deeper. We'll get into that more in the lessons, but we'll talk about that more in the lessons. What does Garvey mean when he says we should never lose our heads? And this goes back to smile with him and why. You may need your calm and collective judgment to save your life, logical rationale. So here, Mr. Garvey is kind of recapping not to be emotional, but we must be rational and logical. But it's effective from a diplomatic standpoint. Why does Garvey say that morally a diplomat must be a scamp? Mr. Garvey says he must be a mental twister. The diplomat must be a mental twister. He is to anticipate the evil of other men's designs. So we must anticipate other men's evil. The world and mankind are immoral and dishonest in their behavior. And this is lesson 9. Keep that in mind. The world and mankind are immoral and dishonest in their behavior. We'll bring that back when we get to lesson 11. He has to adopt such a method to safeguard himself or his interests from such a design. So we must understand that man's nature is more immoral and wicked. And we must anticipate their actions as diplomats. So that's why Mr. Garvey is saying a diplomat must be a scamp, because if we're too good, we're too honest, we're too angelic, then we won't be able to anticipate what these evil individuals are doing or what they're thinking and planning. But we have to be able to imagine that. What does Garvey say about truth and lying? And again, this is in regards to diplomacy. And again, diplomacy is the peculiar relationship between nations. So this is not something that we would do within our organization, lying to each other and saying that the ends justifies the means and that we're exemplifying diplomacy, because you're not. We are one nation, we are one society, we are one group. So to lie to each other is not diplomacy. That's not diplomacy. But Mr. Garvey says in this lesson, if the truth is going to affect your case, then never speak of it, but go around it in every kind of ambiguous way to justify your lie to save the cause. But again, this is diplomacy. This is, talking with other people. Yes, I will make sure you have, your 1,000 gallons of water the first of the month. Even though you may not have nothing like that. But in diplomacy, you need that person's approval. So sometimes you have to lie to get what you need for your people and for your race. And Mr. Garvey talks about that more in depth in this lesson. But again, like I said, that's why I don't like starting here with new people, because it can be jarring. But all of this is based upon a mastery of foundation of 1 through 7. In regards to our enemies, in regards to our enemies, what should we profess and what should we give them? Profess friendship for your enemy. Offer your enemies gifts you can afford to lose. So Mr. Garvey, in this lesson, I think he used example of my good friend, Mr. Jones. So even if it's somebody you don't like, you're in disagreement with, from a political standpoint, you express friendship and you offer gifts that you can afford to lose. But diplomacy. Why should we avoid yes or no answers to important questions in regards to diplomacy? This is in relation to the double speak, leaving your remark or your words room for controversy or denial of the meaning. So we can't always, if someone asks us a yes or no question, we can't always give them a direct yes or no answer. We must be political, we must be diplomatic, and we must give ourselves the opportunity to rephrase or redefine what we said. What should you offer men or women if you want them to talk? Mr. Garvey says offer them courtesy, find out their weakness, and cater to that weakness. So we have to do what we have to do for our race as leaders. Who should have access to the valuable diplomacy papers and why? No one should have access to those papers. Keep them secretly and privately because you don't know who may give you away, even innocently. So, going back to lesson 1, protect our private libraries. Lesson 9 is reinforcing that, protect our diplomacy papers and protect them from everyone. But to be forewarned is to be forearmed. If we lose our important library information, if we lose our important diplomacy information, that's nobody's fault but our own. We have the information. We know how we should protect that information. So moving forward, it's on us. Fred Hampton, just to recap politics, and reword it in Fred Hampton's words, but it still applies. We understood that politics is nothing but war without bloodshed, and war is nothing but politics with bloodshed. So politics is war, but you know it's war without bloodshed. So it's not for the novice. It's not for the faint at heart. This is for the real deal Garveyites in leadership, that are really trying to get things done, from a political policy standpoint. But this is just the way the world works. We either get involved, or we get left behind. So another visual of lessons 1 through 9. So again, lessons 1 through 7 is focusing on developing a better you, you looking in the mirror, developing yourself. Before we go out and try to criticize anyone else, we want to make sure we got our stuff together. Lesson 8 is creation of society. So we want to get like-minded individuals. As we get this class, this group, our executive body, we should all be of like-minded individuals. We should be creating a society. And our membership should also be becoming a part of that society. But we must understand that entry into that society is not about your will, but well, it is about your will. But are you willing to go through what it takes to be of the same mind? Amos 3:3. How can two walk together unless they be agreed? So saying that we want to be a part of the UNIA, saying that we want to be carry out Mr. Garvey's vision or update it is wonderful and beautiful. But if we're not willing to come together and do the work, if some people are willing to come together and put in, 20 hours a week, they're going to be on a different level than those that can only do 20 minutes a week. So they're still going to be in a similar society, but that there's going to be levels. And that's why the executive body is in that more extreme. We're willing to contribute what we feel is the time needed to be of the same mind. And then lesson 9 is diplomacy. So this is examples of societies. So the United States would be a large society or nation. Within that society, you have small societies. So this could be like McDonald's or something, or Netflix. Actually, we're having some issues with Netflix currently due to the Good Times cartoon. We're looking at protesting them, but that would be a society. NFL or NBA could be a society, and diplomacy is how we interact with that society. So we may, be completely against them and their beliefs. We can't come out swinging, we can't come out trying to knock them out. We want to have a level of diplomacy, so that we can have the laws changed, so we can, address this the right way and we won't have to address it in the near future. But that's diplomacy. Lesson 10 is economy. What kind of economy does this subject deal with? So this lesson, the economy that Mr. Garvey focuses on is financial economy. So there's different types of economy. I'm not going to get into all of them because I don't even know all of them. But just to get straight to the point, we're talking about financial economy. What side of bargains should we be on? Mr. Garvey says that we should always be on safe side of a bargain. That's fairly obvious, but just making it explicit and something that we should understand as leaders. And as leaders, as we're talking about investing or spending funds, we must be on the safe side of a bargain. What is something we should always have in regards to economy? And Mr. Garvey says we should always have a reserve. So we should always have some savings or whatever it may be, but a percentage of our fund should be set aside for a reserve. What is the prop of life, that pays for all necessities and offers security for all opportunities? Mr. Garvey says money. So he uses that term prop in lesson 7, and prop just means foundation. What is the fundamental component? He asked, what is the prop of character? And the prop of character was honesty. So Mr. Garvey says the foundation of economy is money, or a fundamental component of economy is money. What percentage of our income does Garvey recommend we save and why? So that reserve should be 15 to 20%. If you spend all that you have, you are on the edge. We're always on the edge of bankruptcy. So we must keep 15, 20% to remain, away from bankruptcy and have some financial security. So that can be applied as individuals, and that should also be applied as an organization. What caused us to become, quote, a slave working for somebody else? Mr. Garvey says the moment you pay interest on money you borrow. So we have to try to avoid taking out loans where we have interest, financing things where we have interest. Some things we can't avoid, but we want to limit those interest rates and understand that that's slavery in a sense. We're not just paying back what we borrow, but we're paying extra. So Mr. Garvey considers that slavery. You're paying back interest is a form of slavery. Garvey says it's bad business to go into any business without enough blank to run that business. 99 of 100 cases will fail, and that answer is capital. It's bad business to go into any business without enough capital to run that business. So we should understand that as we talk business, personally, professionally, organizationally. We should have, capital should be part of that discussion. How much capital do we have? How much capital do we need? Number 8, if we are organizing an event, what percentage of profit should we expect? If there's no profit, then what are we taking? Mr. Garvey says that if we're doing an event, we should expect 25% profit. He says that if there's no profit, you are taking a risk, you are wasting time. That's more for our organization. We haven't made 25% profit. We haven't really made a lot of profit, not directly in regards to our events, but I wouldn't say that they've been a waste of time. They have been good for recruiting, but I think from a business standpoint, from an economy standpoint, we have to be better about making sure that we make a profit on our events. So I said a lot just to say nothing. We got to do better, basically. We're doing okay, but we can do better. And Mr. Garvey encourages us and is trying to explain to us how to do better. How does a president or representative of the UNIA occupy a position of eminence that calls for the greatest recognition of service rendered? And the answer to that question is raising money. So we want to be honored. We want to be recognized. In Garvey's time, things may not apply currently, but Mr. Garvey said that the foundation for recognition should be the raising of money. And I got a scripture here. I think this is where they were hiding the money. So book of Matthew, chapter 25, verse 28 through 30. Take ye therefore a talent from him and give it unto him which hath 10 talents. For everyone that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance, but from him that hath not shall be taken away, and even that which he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So even the scripture promotes for us to be profitable. We're not just a, you know, a safe where we put money in and just let the money sit. We are supposed to be a profitable people, a profitable organization. And if we are not profitable, we should not be surprised if, um, our potential profit is taken away from us by leadership. Because we're not, obviously, there may be others that can be more profitable with what we are doing than we are. I think that's what the scripture is trying to convey. Okay. Yes. All right, we'll be out of here 30 minutes, hopefully. Should be out of here in 30 minutes. Yeah, we're doing good. Okay, we already did that. How are men and women promoted? Garvey says, quote, is the only standard by which you can judge the ability of man. And Mrs. Garvey says men are promoted on their record, and their record must be profitable. So, Brother Najee, I'll get with you as our financial secretary in training, but that's really what that's about, is our monthly reports. And we have a report. Our May report was due yesterday, but we must submit our reports and show profit in our reports. That is what Mr. Garvey says is the only standard by which you can judge the ability of man. Number 10, when should we pray for something if we can get it at when should we pay more for something if we can get it at a cheaper price? Mr. Garvey says if you have money to throw away, always look around first. But this is, that's more organizational. This is not our funds. We're not to be frivolous with the funds. We are to be frugal with the funds and make sure that we are getting the best price for our expenses. In Garvey's view, what does it mean to give to God, and what are examples of not giving to God? So, in regards to charity and religious donations, Mr. Garvey says to carry on social service work, help the poor, rescue children is giving to God. To send a man touring around the world, giving man more worldly goods is not giving to God. So, doing charitable work is giving to God. But if someone's asking for money for a plane to fly around the world, speaking, Mr. Garvey says that's probably not given to God. What does Garvey say about buying a new suit? And he spoke about this in a previous lesson. Is nothing is wrong with your suit of clothes. Don't buy a new one. All it may need is attention. And so with everything, you may badly need the money later. When trouble comes, you can run with your money, but you may not be able to carry all the things. So frugality, maintenance, taking care of the things that we have, but not being excessive, not purchasing or acquiring things just for the sake of doing it. So if you don't need things, if you don't need an additional one, let's take care of the ones that we have and save our money, because you can travel farther with the money in your pocket than you can with the thing that you're purchasing. Review of lesson 10, number 9. If we have ambition to be great, but we don't have the means to immediately do so, and that's financially, what does Garvey recommend that we practice? Mr. Garvey says we should practice rigid thrift by saving as much as you can so that you'll be able to change your position to reach your objective. But it's our responsibility. We don't have the money. We don't have the funds. We're not at a financial place that we want to be. Very first thing that we should be doing is practicing rigid thrift, reducing our expenses and saving as much as we can. In order to make a profit in business, what must we do before we get into that business? Mr. Garvey says that we should know the business. Never get into any business that you know nothing about. And for example, I put in Black Star Line versus the Negro World. Negro World was Mr. Garvey's bread and butter, history and upbringing, career as a journalist, a printer. Negro World, it was easy for him, and it was extremely successful. However, the Black Star Line was more of an engineering challenge, not necessarily Mr. Garvey's wheelhouse. And we can see the successes with the Negro World compared to the challenges, we'll say, of the Black Star Line. So know our business, know what we're getting into. And again, that goes back to lesson one of constantly acquiring knowledge and having a broad base of knowledge. What is the difference between the profit of a business and the capital of a business? Capital is the initial sum invested. So the money that you use to make other money, money used to make more money. Profit is the total revenue. So everything that you brought in minus what was invested. So if you spent $1,000 to buy t-shirts and then you sold those t-shirts for $1,500, your capital was the $1,000 and your profit would be $500. But we should understand the difference between capital, profit, and let me see. Does he talk about making sure I think he talks about make sure we maintain the profit. Why must we live on the profit of a business and not the capital of the business? Mr. Garvey says the time may come when you have to live on the capital because you have made no profit for that period. But your capital is your reinvestment. That is, so yeah, the shirt example. We got $1,000. We spent the $1,000. Now we don't have no money, but we got $1,500 worth of shirts. We sell those shirts for $1,500. Why must we live on the profit of the business? Oh, so in order to be able to do that all over again, we must understand that it took $1,000. So we spend, $600 of our what we thought was our profit. Then now we've just lost the ability to reinvest that $1,000. So we must only live on the profit. We must only live on that 500 extra, and we must keep the initial investment sacred and keep that untouchable. Is really what it's about. But maintaining the ability to constantly be able to reinvest. How does Garvey recommend we keep good relationship with the government, and why is it important to keep a good relationship with the government? So this is a lesson on economy, but it's I think this is kind of touching on diplomacy as well. Take immediate steps to counteract statements of prejudice and reassure the government that you have no intention of doing anything in not keeping with the law. Don't join any movement that the government is not favorably inclined to tolerate, chiefly communism, because the government can easily outlaw your organization and can curtail or prevent your activities. Never let the government put you on defense. It will create prejudice against you. But again, from the society graphic, we are still subordinate to the United States. If we become too unfavorable with the United States can quickly, just delete the UNIA and name it as, put us on, the bad list, so to speak, and make it very difficult for us to function, for us to recruit, and for us to, effect diplomacy with other societies, because we will be essentially be blackballed. So we must maintain a good relationship with Babylon, United States. All right, a couple more questions. Why does Garvey say that we should settle our disputes without going to the law? Mr. Garvey says that the law is expensive and uncertain. You establish a bad record, and you can easily be searched, and the court records also cause the government to think badly of our race. So we must handle our disputes amongst ourselves, amongst our own society. We must not take our disputes out of our society and bring them into the United States realm, because now you know, we're airing our dirty laundry, so to speak. So it's a no-no to go to the law in the UNIA, to go outside of the UNIA legal structure. What type of things should we make the government aware of? So the government that we are under, why should governments know us? What should we be known for? All in one question. So government should know of our social service work, our charitable work, our educational, public education, tending towards good citizenship. So the government should know of our, as we say in our preamble, social, educational, charitable, institutional, um, all of those directives. And again, that's where programs come into place. Do we have charitable programs? Do we have educational programs? Are these things that we can show and promote to the government, or are these things that we've just discussed, but we've never put into action? So we got to put these programs into action to give us some cushion when it comes to the government. So the government doesn't have to ask, what are these people doing? What are they doing with their time? They meeting all the time. What are they discussing when they're meeting? It becomes obvious. You're like, oh, okay, they got a youth program. They got a Black Cross Nurse program. They got an education program. They're trying to do real estate for the community and improve credit. So it becomes obvious as to what we are doing, how we are spending our time, and how we can interact with the government in a positive way. What type of things should we, okay, what information does Garvey say that we should keep, quote unquote, private like the Jews? And the answer is racial education. So Mr. Garvey says that we have to have a dual education. We must go through public school, through United States education system, but at the same time, we should be getting a secondary racial education. And that's what Course of African Philosophy is about. That is what our Race First study group is about. Once we develop our youth programs, that is what that will be about. But it's a secondary education that instills race pride. The second aim and object of the UNIA is to promote a spirit of pride and love. And the way that we do that, or one of the ways that we do that, is through education. Mr. Garvey says that we must develop a private education, so that once our children come home from public school, all right, this is your African-centered education now, so that you get, because Mr. Garvey says that the Jew, yeah, I don't know where he says it, but he says that the Jew has an advantage because he knows everything that you know because he goes to your school, but then he has a private education that you know nothing about. So he's getting two educations while you're only getting one. And the one education that you're getting, he's getting that education as well. So he has everything that you have, plus some things that you're not even aware of. But we have to create that for ourselves. Lesson 11, man. We'll start with some scriptures here. Proverbs 24:16 through 20 to get us grounded. But man is a very, very, very important lesson. Yes, very important lessons. Just like lesson 1, it's a lifelong something you keep with you forever. Proverbs 24, verse 16 through 24. For a just man falleth 7 times and rises up again, but wicked shall fall into mischief. So wicked. Rejoice not when thine enemy falleth, and let not thine heart be glad when he stumbleth, lest the Lord see it and displease him, and he turneth away his wrath from him. So you laughing at somebody, and the Lord will see it. Lord will be displeased with what you're doing and turn his wrath away from the one that you're rejoicing about. Fret not thyself because of evil men, neither be thou envious at the wicked. So wicked again, evil, for there shall be no reward to evil men. The candle of the wicked shall be put out. I'm sure the right thing. And now let me get the other one. Deuteronomy 25:1. Deuteronomy 25:1 says that if there be a controversy between men, and they come unto judgment, that the judges may judge them, and they shall justify the righteous and condemn the wicked. So it's about wicked. There's a difference between, there's always been a distinction between the righteous and the wicked. Is kind of the point. Why must man be regarded as dangerous? So the first thing that Mr. Garvey talks about in this lesson is why men must be regarded as dangerous. And he says that men acts only for their own benefit, but men are naturally selfish. So they must be regarded as dangerous. When you come across a man, his intentions most likely are not to help you, but to help himself. That's just the way it is. What lesson talked about calculating for the vices of man? What word was used? We just talked about this lesson 9, scamp. So lesson 11 is following up on kind of why we must have the mentality that we must have as diplomats. Why man is wicked. Examples of the wickedness of man can be found in the Bible, according to Mr. Garvey. And I got Luke 20 pulled up. Luke 20:20 says, and they watched him and set forth spies which should feign themselves just men, that they might take hold of his word, so that they might deliver him unto the power and authority of the governor. So this is talking about basically when they were coming to take Jesus, take Christ. But they would feign themselves as just men, that they might take over his words, that they might deliver him unto the power and authority of the governor. Okay. But not everyone is just. Let me see. Yes. Okay. So yeah, that's talking about the wickedness of man. How we hear of the miracles of Christ, of the benevolence of Christ, but you also see the wickedness of man and how they treated Christ. Until we know man personally, what should we regard him as? Mr. Garvey says we should regard man as vile until we get to know him personally. But basically, don't take any chances, don't take any risks. To be forewarned is to be forearmed. Don't be afraid of him, understand him, but expect the worst is I think the safest way to approach. In dealing with man, what should you trust? You should only trust yourself, but you shouldn't trust anything until you've proven it. What has history shown man to be? According to Garvey, history has shown man to be the chief murderer or killer. So if you look through the history of man, it's a history of bloodshed, of war, of dishonesty, unrighteousness. But it's ingrained in the history of man. What two things should coincide before we trust someone? Their conduct should coincide with their words. So if they're saying, they're a certain type of individual, they believe certain things, they have certain practices, their conduct should be in alignment with what they say. But we shouldn't just allow people to say who they are, where we're not proving that through their actions. That's a mistake that we make ourselves, and Mr. Garvey does not encourage that. We should make sure that we should follow through with the actions, make sure our actions align with their speech. In regards to man, what is our mission and how do we accomplish it? Mission is to make man good. Talk to man from the loftiest of pinnacle. So our job is to elevate man to the loftiest of pinnacle. So lesson 6, Christ will be a great example. Lesson 7, character will be a great example. There's also lesson 13, universe will be a good example of talking to man. So that's the thing. We have to pursue and achieve these higher ideals, these higher states of consciousness, so that we can attract others to that same state. But if we're not pursuing it, how can we direct others to these lofty pinnacles? What is the present system of education calculated for? Mr. Garvey says the present system of education is calculated to subjugate the majority and elevate the minority, but basically a white supremacist education system. Some things that I missed. What is the benefit of being a part of a fraternity was another question. And again, this goes into that special education. As you know, and this is the same thing that we should have as UNIA as a society, is a special education, an education that you can't get in public schools or publicly accessible information. It's a particular education specific for our society, but that's the benefit of being a part of a society is you get access to particular information. What is the best way to educate or re-educate the Negro after he has been indoctrinated by the current system of education? Mr. Garvey says the best way to do that is to re-educate them in the homes. So that secondary education, like the Jews, once our students, even us, once we come out of this Eurocentric lifestyle, come home from work, come out of school, we must, as this text said, try to instill a fierce Afrocentric perspective. So we have to balance that with African-centered approaches and a mentality. Why have educated Negroes been unable to assume leadership of their race? Mr. Garvey says basically they've been improperly trained. They're trying to solve African problems with a European mind, and they haven't basically had an Afrocentric approach is Mr. Garvey's statements there. Ecclesiastes 21 or 2:21. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom and in knowledge and in equity, yet a man that hath not labored therein, he shall leave it for his portion. This also is vanity and a great evil. So there are some that are pursuing knowledge, pursuing information, trying to make the best of themselves, and there are some that don't pursue that. And the scripture says the lack of that pursuit is vanity and evil. So going back into man, not everyone, we know the issues, we know potential, we know a solution. Not everyone is going to want to pursue that solution. Not everyone is going to want to achieve the loftiest pinnacles of thought. Not everyone is going to want to aspire to, the level that Garvey described in Christ's life, where we can see eye to eye with God. Not everyone is going to want that. But it is what it is. We must understand. Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, that is the only path to overcome wickedness is the pursuit of something greater. And if we're not pursuing something greater, then we're content with our current condition. How do we become prepared for our duties and responsibilities in life? Answer to that is through education. I don't have the exact quote, but it's through education. If a man will rob you of your wages, what else will he rob you of? Page 98. He'll also rob you of the education that will enable you to know that he is robbing you of your wages. So, again, talking about Eurocentric system, they're robbing us of our wages, but if they're going to rob you of your wages, they'll also rob you of the education to let you know that they're robbing you of your wages. So let's not be surprised. What is the particular education reserved for those who want to gain an advantage? So this is of going into the racial education, the fraternal education, detailed education that teaches man to live to the highest. So in these special groups, that is what they're constantly doing. When we think about, you know, the Masons, the 33 degrees, they're constantly trying to raise themselves up to a higher degree of intellect. And we should have an African-centered approach that I mean, basically they stole that from us anyway, but we should constantly be pursuing a higher level of intellect is the point. What is the difference between the Jew education and the Gentile education? Talked about this. The Jew knows both. The Gentile only knows his own. So the Jew knows the Gentile's education. Gentile does not know the Jew's education. Got to fly through these. Okay, so we just talked about man, the wickedness of man, and the only way to resolve that is through education. Which brings us perfectly into lesson 12, which is titled The Purpose of Institutions. What two lessons does the purpose of institutions build off of? A couple answers: social system, society is an organization of mankind, mankind, and lesson 12, organized society is always a mass of people. So don't worry about that too much. What are institutions for? Page 100, Mr. Garvey says institutions are to do the particular work that cannot be done by the masses as a whole. So again, as we talk about these smaller, higher level societies, executive body groups, these are the ones that create institutions to do the particular work that cannot be done by the masses as a whole. But it's a retraining process. It's the beginning of a retraining process. What examples of some institutions? What are some examples of institutions? On page 100, Mr. Garvey says churches, colleges, universities, hospitals, academy, chamber of commerce, fraternity, trade union, literary club, sports club, athletic club, gymnasiums, YMCA or YWCA are all examples of institutions. Why does Garvey say that it is necessary for the Negro to pay close attention to developing the appreciation for institutional life? Mr. Garvey says, in our present civilization, institutions are a requirement for a proper functioning society. So in order to have a proper functioning society, there must be institutions. Institutions develop the mindset, the ideals of the society, and continue to promote, generations that are in alignment with those ideals. How should Negro institutions be modeled? Negro institutions should be modeled with the absolute objective of obtaining the end that is particularly desired by the race. But basically, they should be modeled for the benefit of our people, point blank. Nothing that would subjugate our people. Why should the Negro never completely surrender himself to the institutional life of other people? If we do that, we will not be original. We will be copyists. So personality, we have our own personality. We have our own way of doing things. Nothing new is under the sun. We were the first to create all of these things, so we have a right to recreate them. And we should do that genuinely, but not just copying what others have copied from us. How are the civilization and culture of races built? Civilization and culture of races are built through racial institutions. So we want civilization and culture. We should be building institution. What does it mean to live on the achievement of other races? Mr. Garvey says to do that is to admit the superiority of others and inferiority of ourselves. So, again, going back to institutions, the fact that we as a people, as a race, continue to tout, Harvard's, Yale's, the Cornell's, the Princeton's, that is a constant reminder and a constant acceptance of inferiority. We are constantly saying that these schools are better than anything that we can do for ourselves. So instead of trying to do something better or instead of doing something better for ourselves, we will continue to send our children to what we see as superior institutions. So we have to change that mindset. In order to do that, there must be a society of individuals that have that mindset, and hence the UNIA-ACL. Oh my goodness. Why are we Black people justified in remodeling and reshaping institutions to fit ourselves? Negro is the father of civilization, constructed the first government in Africa, thereby taught others the way. So nothing new under the sun. We are the originators. We can remodel and recreate things to fit ourselves. When is the Negro not living the proper life in accordance with the purpose for which nature has made him? When the Negro does not have his own. So when we don't have our own institutions, we're going against nature, basically. We're not living in accordance with the purpose for which nature made us. Nature didn't make us to be followers. Nature made us to be leaders, to be originators. What does physiognomy mean, and why is it significant to us as a people? Physiognomy means physical features. Mr. Garvey says we are different from other races. If we were one, God would. If God wanted to make us all one people, He would have done that. He could have made us all the same color. He could have all made us broad nose, thick lip, kinky hair, but He didn't. And for whatever reason, we must acknowledge these differences, and we must see beauty in our physical features, in our kinky hair, in our nose, in our melanin. God chose us to make us this way, and we see that as perfection. So obviously there are differences in people, and for us as a people to keep saying, we're all the same, that goes against God's plan, because obviously, He didn't make us all the same. Where does the first white man come from? According to Mr. Garvey, Cain turned white after he slew Abel. After he slew his brother Abel, the white man is Cain transformed. He lived in caves for centuries. How did Cain's family get to Egypt? According to Mr. Garvey, they were ran out by the family of Adam and Eve to Europe across the Mediterranean. So Cain, through the slaying of his brother Abel, was transformed to a white man, and that is, according to Mr. Garvey, he's the progenitor of the white race. The world is only part of the universe. What previous lesson used an example of a unit compared to a universe? And that would be lesson 5, God, where we talked about God as universal intelligence. And we talked about God as universal intelligence and man as unitary intelligence. But I'm reading this as this is part of lesson 13. But who or what rules the world, and through what? How is lordship acquired? Man rules the world through his mind. And when we don't rule the world through our mind, we defer our lordship to others. So what happens when man lifts himself up to his lordship? One man's dispossession of lordship enthrones another man's sovereignty over him. What happens when man fails to lift himself up to his lordship? One man's dispossession of lordship enthrones another man's sovereignty over him. So when we're not able to do for ourselves, we're basically giving others permission to do for us, which is going against nature. There's no rival in the world but who, and that is our fellow man. What is one thing that determines if the world would destroy you, if the world would serve you obediently? It's the understanding and knowledge of the world, knowing the world thoroughly. So whether we know the world or not will determine whether we are able to subdue the world or if the world is able to destroy us. It all comes down to knowledge. What should we do when we discover knowledge that no one else knows about? He says, keep it and use it for the good of yourself and your race. Your first duty in this world is to who? It's to ourselves, our family, our race, and our racial nation. So, order of importance, um, according to Mr. Garvey. Why should we strive to be self-sufficient? We should be self-sufficient to prevent being dependent upon the goodwill of others for our sufficiency. No one will give away value that is wanted for self. So you will have to serve and become servants or slaves to sufficiency. So if we're not self-sufficient, we are planning to, um, be slaves to others. Okay. Two more lessons. I may go about 5 minutes over. Should be able to knock these out. Lesson 13, what has been the eternal puzzle that contains universal knowledge beyond the knowledge of our own world? And Mr. Garvey says it's the riddle of the universe. So again, just teaching us to think beyond what everyday people think. How did the universe come into existence? How does a black hole function? Um, you know, um, yeah, things like that. But just thinking about things that the ordinary person wouldn't consider. What does terrestrial mean? Terrestrial means of or relating to the earth and its inhabitants. So here he talks about studying things that are extraterrestrial versus terrestrial, so outside of the world. How do we approach a greater degree of knowledge than those who confine themselves to only investigation of things that are terrestrial? So how do we go beyond people that only look at things in the world? Mr. Garvey says, identify the facts of the majority units of the universe. The greater minds of our world have experimented and are experimenting with the desire to grapple with all the facts that sustain the universe. Never rest with your limited knowledge of the world, but seek to find other knowledge with which you may be able to lift yourself above that which has been attained or accomplished by man. So again, always stretching ourselves, always pushing ourselves beyond uh, beyond the average, but above average, and that includes spiritually as well. But this is more so intellectually. What is one way that man can become, quote, a hero and an immortal? Mr. Garvey says when he has discovered a truth for which mankind is in need or searching for, leaving behind a never dying name because of the exceptional things that we have been able to perceive and discover through the hidden mirror of universality. Observe well and see what mankind needs most in addition to what they have and bring it to them. So providing for mankind that is that which is in need. And Mr. Garvey feels that we come to these conclusions through universal thought, by imagination, just sitting thinking, what is it? What's the solution for mankind? What would bring peace or end world hunger? Um, make man more efficient. Answering those problems is, according to Mr. Garvey, what causes men to become immortal. If there's a mountain, it suggests that what is behind it. What is Garvey communicating with this statement? So Mr. Garvey said if there's a mountain, it suggests that a valley is behind it. And he's talking about finding the hidden cause to the visible effect. And the thing I got here is Big Bang. Big Bang is a visible effect. When people study the Big Bang, they say that the universe is expanding, which implies that at one time the universe was in one point. But being able to see what is there and being able to find the hidden cause to the visible effect. Examples of individuals who became immortal through their contributions to mankind. Some that Mr. Garvey gave was Edison through electricity, Stephenson through the steam engine, Fulton through the steamboat, and Harvey through the circulatory system. But that was on page 110. What types of people have the ability to see things by looking through the mental darkness? And again, this is going to the imagination, the dreamer, the subconscious manipulator. So these individuals have a vivid imagination, and through their vivid imagination, they're able to provide mankind with something that we may not have even known that we needed. How can we see as much as Christ saw when he saw God? Approach was the deepest sublimity, but basically thinking highly, continuing to think highly. What created the universe and what will master the universe? Mr. Garvey said is thought. Thought created the universe, thought will master the universe. What may lead you suddenly into the conquest of that which heretofore was mysterious? Proper thinking. So thinking, thought, thinking highly. This is what lesson 13 is stressing. Uh, what can we do to climb in excellence to the companionship of the most excellent? Think most excellently. How does man in his excellence lift himself highest to God? Mental industry. So developing our mental industry is how we can lift ourselves highest to God. What happens when man has no mental industry? He forfeits that mental industry to the useful servant who climbs in his excellence to the most excellent. So if we are not going to use our mental industry, someone will be there to use it for us, or someone will have their mental industry and use our physical labor applied to their ideas. So again, we must develop these things for ourselves. We must think for ourselves. And we must think highly for ourselves and for our people. Garvey considers the universe bright and beautiful. So where's the darkness and how do we lighten the darkness? The darkness is in us, is in men and women. And he says, in order to lighten darkness, we want to knowledge. So lesson 11, man. Lesson 12, purpose of institutions. In order to resolve the wickedness, we must attain knowledge. We must establish institutions. The wickedness in man is nothing new. It's inbred. So in order to continue to resolve that issue, we must have long-lasting institutions. What is the goal of enlightenment? Goal of enlightenment is to understand the mysteries of the universe with the knowledge and eyes of God. So seeing eye to eye with God, seeing as God saw. Illumine the soul of God's brilliancy will save. Illumine the soul, and God's brilliancy will be revealed as it was revealed to Christ. So going back to the lesson on Christ, but Mr. Garvey is saying if we continue to develop our minds and our spirits, then we should be able to see the world as God saw it, as Christ saw it, and be able to, solve problems and see problems and solutions as God and as Christ sees them. What does Garvey add to the phrase, man, know thyself? He adds, man, know the universe, and man, know your God. Last lesson, 2 slides. Lesson 14, self-initiative. Do for self, self-reliance, self-governance, self-initiative, best summarized in lesson 14, doing for self. But what is our single responsibility in life? Every man is his own responsibility. So your very first responsibility is yourself and no one else. What is the purpose of life and what is the duty of man? Purpose of life is to live fully. The duty of man is to fall back on himself for whatever he wants, but to be self-reliant. Before you depend on anybody else, you should depend on yourself. Why should individuals decide for themselves what they should do? And the individual should know what is best for himself. So, who am I to decide for you? I understand parents and children, the parent decides what we're going to eat for dinner, but who am I to decide for others, what we're going to eat? Some people, we got different dietary restrictions. Some people don't eat meat at all. Some people don't eat pork. Some people only eat fish. So it is best for you to speak for yourself. And that's what this is about. It is best for us to speak for ourselves because we know best. We know what is best for ourselves, but also we should allow others to speak for themselves because they know what's best for themselves. Uh, What is the best policy in regards to self-initiative? Developing themselves the courage to do things on his or her own account. So, um, best policy for self-initiative is to develop courage to do things on our own. Very straightforward. When we fail to take self-initiative, what do we become? According to Mr. Garvey, page 114, he says we become a sucker for others. But we don't have our own mental industry. We don't have our own ideas. We become a sucker for somebody else because they definitely have some work for us to do, some ideas for us to bring to reality. What is the root of self-reliance, starting point or requirement? And this is on page 114. Mr. Garvey's got like a transition of statements and actions, but the root of it is to maintain a strong will. Your will is your decision. So if we are having struggles with self-reliance, if we're having struggles exemplifying self-reliance, we've got to question what is our will? Do we have a will? Do we have a desire? Is there anything that we wish to eat? Do we have have we even thought about that for ourselves, or are we just waiting for somebody to give us an option? When should you call for help from others? Always try to help yourself only when you are completely satisfied that you do not have the ability, knowledge, character, and strength to do for yourself. Should you call anyone to help you? So getting help is fine. And it is there are places to do that. And we will come across that. But according to what Mr. Garvey says in the Course of African Philosophy, we should always try to help ourselves first. And in this quote, only when you are completely satisfied that you do not have the ability, knowledge, character, and strength to do for yourself, should you call anyone to help you. So it is a complete surrender, calling for help, in the way I understand it. We are expressing that this is not in our wheelhouse. We don't have the expertise to do it, and we need help. Why must we only ask for help from very, very, very good friends or relatives? The thing you ask for help may be valuable. They may take the value for themselves, and all you have is disappointment. So, you may be asking for help for a valuable idea. And we've done this internally, probably as our business group. We have some ideas and we want to take them out to get help. And as we should in some sense, in some instances. But who's to say that when we go out and seek help, that the individuals that we are seeking help from won't take our ideas and implement them themselves? And that's what Mr. Garvey is warning here. And I've got lesson 11, man. Again, we must also understand that men are wicked, and unless they've gone through this same process that we've gone through, Course of African Philosophy, trying to improve or clean up our thinking, why should we expect righteous behavior from these individuals? So to be forewarned is to be forearmed. Last slide. I'll try to increase the size of these just for the sake of discussion. Read this back later. Um, so this is Garvey going into God. Why can man say that there is no God? How is man limited in life and death? So Mr. Garvey doesn't believe that man can say that he is God. He says, because no man is like God. Men and women are born without our knowledge, and we die without our will or wish. So none of us got to decide when we were born. And most of us, when we die, it won't be, you know, by our decision. It'll be by something greater than us. So we must that alone is enough for Mr. Garvey to say that we are not the highest power. What two things should we not say about God? There is no God, and that man is God. Those two things that we shouldn't say about God, according to Mr. Garvey. So that's one of the differences between us and other religious groups that say, you know, black man is God or man is God and white man is the devil. That's not Mr. Garvey's teachings. Why should we not fear God? If you love God, you need not fear him. You only fear God when you're conscious of being evil or wicked. If we love God, we shouldn't fear God. How are we able to handle man without fearing him? By knowing that he is wicked. Page 116, but again, lesson 11 on man went over that in depth. So we should still be able to handle men, work with men, and have a level of expectation as we do that. But we shouldn't be surprised and we shouldn't be caught off guard. How do you allow other men to master you in a meeting? Mr. Garvey says, never cringe before the stare of another man. The first time you take your eyes off him because of his stare, he conquers you because you are unprepared. So being able to maintain eye contact. Mr. Garvey says when you can't do that, um, you've allowed the other individual to master you. But he talks about eye contact in the early lessons as well, maybe elocution, but the importance of eye contact and how it relates to the impact of your message. And yeah. What characteristic of man conquers man? Mr. Garvey says the daring look, the self-confident, strong character, lesson 7, the boldest, longest stare. So this is about, being confident, standing on what you believe, and knowing what you believe, knowing well enough in what you believe to be able to stand on it. When is God pleased with man? When man lifts himself to the true position in his kingdom of earth and heaven. So not being subservient, but thinking for ourselves, doing for ourselves, and acting out our purpose for which God created us, but not, and not just allowing others to create our purpose. What should we ask God for? And what should we not ask God for? So Mr. Garvey says we should ask God for strength, courage, and righteousness, wisdom, and understanding. He says we should not ask for wealth, particular things, or individual things. But basically, if we have strength, courage, righteousness, wisdom, and understanding, then we have everything that we need to be able to acquire anything that we want. But at that point, once we have understanding, wisdom, righteousness, and strength, that goes back to self-reliance. Now we must have self-initiative to take that knowledge and pursue the things that we want. But we shouldn't just sit back and say, okay, God, thank you. You've given me the ability to acquire all the things that I want in life, all the knowledge. All right, now just give me the things that I want. Just give me the car, give me the house, give me, even though I have all of the skills to acquire them, and you've blessed me with all of that, I'm still gonna just sit here, be lazy, and ask you to give me the final thing. It's like why did God take the time to bless us with all of these skills and talents if we're just going to sit back and ask him to create for us? So God is pleased when man lifts himself to his true position in his kingdom of heaven and earth. What should we seek first so that all life will unfurl itself to us through God? Mr. Garvey encouraged us to seek wisdom and understanding first, and then we will understand the mysteries of the universe and be able to understand God and ourselves better. What are the receptacles for understanding and wisdom? Mr. Garvey says the mind and soul or heart, page 117. And this goes back to lesson 2, where Mr. Garvey says that our head and our heart must be in line. So the receptacles for wisdom and understanding, wisdom probably be in the heart, understanding in your head, but those two must be in alignment in order for us to exemplify, our knowledge of course of African philosophy. Any questions? It is 5:16, and that completes lesson 14. Next week we'll finish up lessons 15 through 21. But were there any
Great
questions?
job, President.
What's that?
Great review. Great job, President.
Thank you, late President. But yeah, please let me know if there are any questions. Cause as I said, I'm a little tired. I'm about to drop off. If there aren't any questions, we'll close out in orientation at 8 p.m. So orientation in 2 hours and some change, and we have a mass meeting tomorrow. Elections tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you for that review.
Not a problem. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, for calling in. I will give you, some of your time back as we get ready for orientation. And we'll wrap this up next week and, in anticipation for the full course to begin in September. If there is not anything else, if you would, please come off mute and we'll close out with the motto and the slogan. If you would, please repeat after me. One God,
One God,
one aim,
one aim,
one destiny.
one destiny.
Africa,
Africa,
for the Africans.
for the Africans,
Those at home,
Those at
those
home
at home,
and those abroad.
and those
and
abroad.
those abroad.
Race first, family. Go in peace.
Race
First family.